Hi, it's Mike Lawrence. I'm lead pastor at Faith Community Church. And we're kind of in a different environment, aren't we? This is my serene spot. You're going to hear ambient noise around me, and that's okay, because you can still have serenity in the midst of a lot of noise. Hey, we just finished up Dust to Diamonds, which was amazing. I really love those stories. Next week, we start Homecoming in the building. I got to get that out of my system. Oh, I can't wait. Both Framingham and Hopkins are going to go back in the building. Like I said to the outdoor church man, listen, people say to me all the time, church is more than a building. That's right, but a building sure helps when it rains, right? So I'm encouraging you, come to church next week. Join us in Homecoming in the new facility in Hopkinton. We've renovated it. It's like, wow, you should come in. It's going to be an amazing experience. In Framingham, you get a new facility to work in with the temple, and it's just a great place with such generous people. Go, join us in worship. It's going to be phenomenal. Now what I want to do is I want to pick up on this scene, because we're going to talk a little bit about Matthew out of context. I'm going to jump ahead to a scene later in Matthew and pull it out. Last week I had a conversation with some staff members, and they asked me, so how is it that you've survived these last 18 months? And I shared from this passage in Matthew. It was a life-saving passage to me over the last 18 months, and they really appreciate it. And they said, you know what, you should share that with more people. So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to look at a chapter in Matthew, chapter 14. We're going to pick up around verse 21. I'm also going to look at it in Mark. And we'll bounce over there in chapter 6, verse 45. It's the same story in both Gospels, slightly different nuance to it. And I like what each person has to say, so we're going to pull from both people as we look from it. This is a great story. It means a lot to me. It means so much to me. So I hope it means something to you. And let's pray and jump in. God, I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak, and I want to pray that you use it. I want to pray that it blesses people. I want to pray, Jesus, that you bring hope to others and you bring joy to them through what I have to say. God, I'm praying because I know that you are the type of God who goes above and beyond our wildest expectations. You're a good, gracious, and generous God, and I trust you at this moment. I love you, Father, and I love the people that are listening to this. Would you bless them, and would you bless yourself? And I love you, Jesus, and I trust you, Holy Spirit, so take advantage of this time. Use it well. Amen. Like I said, you're going to hear some ambient noise, but trust me, I've had some incredibly peaceful moments back here in the midst of some pretty loud ambient noise, because that's life. You have to find peace in the midst of turmoil. So just to set the stage, Jesus has been standing he's on a seashore right now, and he's just fed thousands of people, and they're trying to press on him some things that they want him to do that he doesn't feel comfortable with. He's literally caught between all this crowds of people on land and the water behind him. So he turns around to his disciples and he says, guys, get in the boat, go to the other side. I'll catch up with you. I'll deal with the crowd. I got to go pray, and then I'll catch up to you. All right. So that's the scene, and we're going to pick up with it. I'm going to read from Matthew. So immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Now later that night he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. So what happened is that the disciples are now following Jesus' orders. They went out onto the waters, and a storm happened. And it was a natural phenomenon. This wind could come crashing down onto the sea and create this tremendous storm that they had to face. And it's like a nor'easter in New England, and maybe you've been out boating and the wind is then coming in the wrong direction. And I've been in this case, and suddenly your boat is buffeted by some pretty huge waves, and even with an engine you're trying hard to make it back to shore. Well, here's the disciples caught out in the middle of this, trying to do what Jesus wanted them to do. And I love what Mark says. This is Mark 6:48. And Jesus saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. Here are these disciples. They're just trying to do what Jesus told them to do. Jesus said, get in the boat, go to the other side. Makes sense? we'll do that. So they get in the boat, they go to the other side, and an unexpected storm happens, and it hits them so hard that they're struggling painfully to get to the other side. And that's been the last 18 months. Not just for me, for you too. 2020 was really hard, wasn't it? I mean, the pivot to the pandemic, the isolation, the fear, the anxiety, the way we struggled to get a hold of resources, the difficult election we had, the social unrest that happened, people worried about their jobs and their finances. I mean, it was a hard year. And we kept saying the same thing. It's unprecedented. We've never been in this situation before. We're trying to figure out ministry under new circumstances. We were exhausted as a staff, constantly pivoting to hit new challenges and to rise above them. And it didn't help that we were getting emails from people and conversations, people saying polar opposite things and giving us a wonderful direction and advice, all in different, going in different directions. People getting frustrated and leaving, people coming on board, and we had awesome moments and we had hard moments. And I'll tell you something, for me personally, as hard as 2020 was, and it was really hard, there were moments where I felt like I was slipping into depression and I would pull back out. 2021 felt like the little brother that had something to prove. Man, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer in the very beginning of January of 2021. Pastor Bob came and told me that he had been diagnosed with lymphoma the very same week. And so we were able to commiserate with one another. We had important staff members who stepped down. You know, in the last 18 months, we've had 10 transitions from staff, and we haven't replaced them all. We can't even afford to replace them all. We've had to rethink how we do staff. Our staff has stepped up in remarkable ways to take on extra duties and responsibilities. And then I remember in February getting a phone call from Charles, like, you got to come to the church. And I walk into the church, and it's a disaster. Water had flooded from behind the old projection screen and washed into the worship center and down through the worship center to the floor below it. It had gone into the chapel area. Like almost 30% of our building had been touched. They came in and they started ripping out sections of the walls to make sure that the electricity hadn't been damaged. You're like, you got to be kidding me. And suddenly, in the midst of all these restraints on how many people we could have in worship in the building and wearing masks and all that, we pivoted out of the worship center over to the commons, and then they cleaned up the worship center enough that, like, well, you could use that for now. And we turned over to the worship center and we did it sideways. And then we had to work rapidly to figure out what was the insurance settlement going to be and how much could we do. And we hit the point where we could do the renovations. And so we went outside, you know, and here we are. You know, I remember thinking to ourselves, talking with the staff, like, hey, we're going to go outside. And it may rain on a Sunday, but honestly, how many Sundays is it going to rain? I think we lost half our Sundays to rain. In the midst of all this, you know, I'm trying to figure out, I had surgery on my birthday. I get out of surgery, time passes, and the doctor says it was a little more aggressive than what we thought, so let's do another blood draw. And so we do a blood test, and he calls me, he's like, your PSA didn't go away. It's high enough that I need to turn you over to some really good doctors at Dana-Farber. And so I built a relationship with a radiation oncologist and a medical oncologist. It's like, wow, in the midst of all these ministry changes and all that's going on, it's like, now this, God? You know, and in July, I got my first hormone shot. And the week my daughter got married, I met with our oncologist, and she said, hey, good news. Seems like your body's responding well to treatment. That's awesome. And I celebrated my daughter's wedding. My life this summer, my wife talking about it, for the Lawrence family, we've been living in really highs and real lows. Like not a lot in between. And that's draining. We know that. We're guarding ourselves. But if you know anything about emotional impact, you know how draining that is. And so, hey, you know, in a matter of 3 weeks, my daughter got married. It's one of the Lawrence's highest points in our life. We just all had such a wonderful, joyful experience. And then I went down to Maryland. I celebrated my grandson's first birthday on a Saturday, drove back on a Sunday, and began my radiation treatment. 38 days, Monday to Friday. I go in for a 7 15 shot, and then I'm back in the office at 8:30, and we'll do that 38 times. Wow. So it's just like, man, life is highs and lows, and it's not just me. I've talked with staff, I've talked to people in our church, and you don't think we lost Pastor Bob, my dear friend and our co-worker, and like God, we are leaning into the oars painfully, just trying to do what you told us to do. Go in the direction we thought you wanted us to go. And God, it is really hard. So we felt like the disciples. So, 3 things I want to say about this that have helped me out tremendously. So here's Jesus. Okay? Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. And when the disciples saw him walking on water, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, crying out in fear. But Jesus immediately says this to them. Now listen, this is important. It's a game changer. It makes sense that they're afraid, right? I mean, the situation has gone like, you kidding me? We're fighting against a storm, and now this happens, and we don't know what's going on. And Jesus, what are you doing? And they're freaking out. And Jesus says 3 things to them. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Now, this is an awesome statement. Take courage and don't be afraid. If you do a little bit of study on those 2 concepts, if you say, look up, don't be afraid and take courage, it shows up at some pretty interesting times. Like Joshua, this great man of God, he's in the Bible. There's a whole book named after him. It's like the 6th book of the Bible. And he's being asked to take over from Moses, a tremendous leader. God's given him the challenge. You're going to take the whole nation across the river. You're going to set up another nation. And God says to him like 3 times in the very beginning of the book, take courage, don't be afraid. It's what God says to us when we're in an overwhelming situation and we just don't know what to do. And I learned this, if anything, this last year. Take courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to take action despite your fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to take action despite your fear. That's what we had to learn to do this year. With all the constant changes at the church, from the pandemic to the unrest, to the flood, to the cancer, to the loss of staff, to illness in staff. It's about taking courage and not drowning in fear. But you can do that because it's those 2 statements, take courage, right, and do not be afraid, a bookends to a real important statement. Jesus says, it is I. For the longest time, I thought, it is I. It's like Jesus is like, hey guys, don't freak out, it's just me, right? Boy, man, it is I. This is an amazing thing. It's the Greek way of saying a very important Hebrew sentence, I am. And that's super important because when Moses, that one leader I was talking about, when he needed to know who God was because he was facing a tremendous leadership challenge and that God wanted him to do and he wasn't sure what to do, God said, you tell him I am sent you. And throughout the history of Israel, that was a precious name of God for the people. They always knew, I am, Yahweh is with us. It was a statement to say that I am the presence who is always with you. I'm not in your past. I'm not always in your future. I am in your present. I've followed you through your past, and I'm leading you into your future. I am there as well because he is above time. He is the great I am, he who was and is to come. What Jesus is saying is I am. Jesus is saying, I'm not just a great religious leader. I'm not just a wise teacher. I'm not just doing these miraculous things because God has a special hand on my life. I am God, wrapped in human flesh. It's what we talked about last week in a brown paper package. The Hope Diamond has been delivered. He can walk above the waves because he's the creator. And it's a beautiful thing. When you think about this, Jesus is coming to them over the waves with the wind. It's meant to reflect all the way back to the book book of Genesis, in the very first chapter about creation, where the Spirit of God hovered over the troubled waters of creation and stilled them. What Mark and Matthew are saying is that I am is wrapped up in Jesus. The presence of God is there in the midst of the storm, coming to you, so you don't have to be afraid. You can actually have courage. So I've created a mantra for myself. These 3 statements that I keep in my head that have guided me through the last 18 months. And the first one is, keep your eyes focused on Christ. He is the I am. He is God manifest. And because he is, I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be afraid of a pandemic and social unrest and a flood in the church and cancer, because Christ is the presence with me. And so I find my courage in him. And so this mantra is keep your eyes focused on Christ, because the second thing is to keep moving forward one step at a time. Now this is an amazing thing. Mark tells this story so well. Matthew tells this story really well. So Peter says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come on the water. And so Jesus says, come. And Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. This is the thing. Just keep walking forward one step at a time. That's what Jesus did. That's what Peter did. I mean, I got to imagine what it was like to be Peter, right? He's like, yeah, if it's really you, tell me to come. Because Peter had a way of shooting out of his mouth and saying something before he really thought it through carefully. So Jesus like, all right, come on out. So Peter's like, oh. And what's he going to do? He's in front of all of these disciples, right? He's like, okay. And so he steps out on the boat and he walks on water. Not because Peter had the skill to do that. It's not because the power it was in him to do that. It's not because Peter had some special manifestation. It was because he kept his eyes on Jesus. And he just took one step at a time through the storm. Keep your eyes focused on Christ. Keep moving forward one step at a time. And there's been times I've had to do this over this last 18 months. I didn't know what to do with the pandemic. Nobody trained us in our schooling. It was in a part of our human experience. With pastors all over the place were scrambling. We're all saying the same thing. We're just trying to figure it out and to do the best that we can. And we pull the team together and we ask good questions and we do some great research. Like, what's the next thing that we should do? I remember when the building was in disarray. Like, okay, guys, what can we do this week? We can put together an online service. Awesome. After a couple of weeks, now what can we do? I think we can set up and use the worship center. Okay, we can't use that. Now that we're going to be doing renovations, now what do we do? Well, we can go outside. We already did that, so that makes sense. Okay, we can go outside. What are we going to do for online? We'll keep the online going for the people who can't come in person. Just kept doing the next thing. Just take another step. Keep moving forward. It's like the cancer. You're like, how you doing? How you doing? It's like, you know what? I just do the next thing. I had the surgery. I needed to see some doctors at Dana-Farber. Then the doctor said, we have this treatment plan we want you to follow. It starts with a hormone shot. So I got the hormone shot. And they say, great, now we want you, and we want you to get these tests. So I took the test. And they say, okay, then we're going to let the hormones sit in you for a while, and then we're going to start radiation. People are like, how you doing? I'm like, I got the shot. The next thing to do is to start the radiation. And so you know what I do? Every morning, my alarm goes off at 5:30. My beautiful wife is so kind to me to fill up my Yeti with coffee. I get in my car by 6. I drive into Boston. I park it. I walk into Brigham and Women's. I go downstairs. I get my radiation. I walk out. I get in my car. I drive to the office. 5 days a week, 38 times. I just keep doing one step forward. My son had this great idea, right? So we found this image on Pinterest. I'll throw it out on Facebook just so you can see it. And it turns out that if you're a Boston sports fan, the top 4 teams, right, Red Sox, Bruins, Celtics, and Patriots, have collectively attained 38 championships. So we got this, I got this great image of these all 38 banners. And I come home, and one of us in the family cross off the banner. Right now I'm in the middle of the Celtics dynasty. Pastor Bob would have loved that, right? And I'm just going to keep tacking them on. And the beautiful thing is, because I'm a huge Patriots fan, you know what the last banner is? Big Tom's last win. So it's good to be a Boston sports fan. Keep moving forward, one step at a time. Sometimes, and I'm a planner, I love having goals and strategy that go years forward. A long-range plan of 10 years, and I'll plan out a couple of years and 2 years. And those are the elders, the summer, like, guys, I can give you 6 months. I know what I need to do over the next 6 months. We need to get the building renovated. We need to get back into the facility. We need to look for some new staff. We need to deal with a deficit budget. And we need to help our people rebuild their community. And I'm going to stay focused on those. And I'm just going to keep doing the next thing. You know what my next thing is? September 12th, being in the facility with you, worshiping together in common faith. Come on, let's do this, right? So what's your next step? Just keep your eyes focused on Jesus. Keep moving forward, one step at a time. And then here is the third thing. So I love Peter. So here's Peter walking towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and he was beginning to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me!" And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. So I want to stop there for a second. You know what happened? He took his gaze off of Jesus, and he looked at the storm, and he started to sink. So that's the third part of my maxim. So I say this to me all the time. Keep your eyes focused on Jesus. Keep your eyes focused on Christ. Keep moving forward one step at a time, and keep your head above the waves. That has helped me through these 18 months. Keep your head above the waves is don't drown in the emotions. So here, I just have this philosophy. It's like, I can't control what I feel, but I can control what I'll do with what I feel. And I have some friends and some family members, they have anxiety issues, and I get that. And I was a guy that I had anger nurtured into me, so I understand it's not that easy, right? But honestly, through Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit and the Word of God to guide me, in my lifetime, I have learned that I may not be able to control what I feel, but I can control what I do with what I feel. That's been my lifelong journey. Now here's the thing. Everyone sinks below the waves at some point. Fear, anxiety, depression, anger. It's a wave that crashes us, and sometimes we feel like we're sputtering for breath, and that's happened to me over these last 18 months. Here's some things I do. I want to share with you, I think there's 12, one for each of the disciples. Okay? I'm just joking, right? The 12 things I do. I run. I don't run far, and I don't run fast. But putting my body into motion has a way of helping me burn off stress. I have learned to endure through stressful times by running. When I want to give up, I just keep going. Last December, I ran my first half marathon. Turns out I had double pneumonia at the time. It was not a pretty run. And I remember I hit mile 11 and I was exhausted in those last 2 miles. I like to say I ran my first half marathon and it wasn't pretty, and the last 2 miles were ugly. It was just a matter of moving forward. But that run and enduring through that stress has taught me in life that when stress hits me, take a deep breath and just keep moving forward like you do when you're running. Number 2, I do my 10 blessings every day. I've shared this before. Every day, I find 10 reasons to thank God for the last 24 hours. Sometimes life is really hard. And what I'm saying is God, I got a reliable car. I got a good paying job. I got a house over my head in the midst of the storm. I've got a good family. I've got food in the fridge. I got clean water. I got a change of clothes. I just get that rudimentary. And sometimes I have these wonderful moments. But here's the thing. If you keep looking for these moments of gratitude, 10 blessings every single day, you start to see God in ways you didn't expect. Brene Brown, who I really appreciate, says, Resilient people who live life wholeheartedly, one of their common characteristics is they just live life with gratitude. So do that. Number 3, really identify what recharges your battery. For me, it's solitude. My kids don't understand. It's like I shut off the radio at times when I'm in my car and I live in the quiet. In my office, I'll shut the door and I'll just take a moment to breathe. I find a healing power in solitude. I discovered this from a book written by a man named Gary Thomas, Sacred Pathways. He's talked about 12 different ways, disciplines or approaches to spiritual development that in your walk with Jesus Christ, it can help you. Sacred Pathways by Gary Thomas. And one that really attuned to me was solitude. The quiet heals me. I connect with nature. So, right there, on a Sunday afternoon, this is my therapy, and I'll lie on that hammock for an hour or so, and I just feel my body melt into it, my stress go away. I get up from that in an hour on my hammock on a beautiful Sunday afternoon after I've preached. It's my therapy. It's my Zen place. And you need to find that. I connect with nature out here. It's a combination of solitude and nature. Just finding that spot where I can see the blue skies and watch the wind ripple through the leaves of these beautiful trees in the fall, hear the cry of a hawk that sometimes, honestly, we get an eagle that will scream going overhead. I just breathe that in. I've had deer walk by my yard. It's a beautiful thing. Number 5, I connect with nature. Oh, I told you that, right? Yeah, my hammock. Yeah, you know what? I'm just being human with you. I learned to laugh out loud. You know what I decided a long time ago is that if I'm going to laugh, I'm going to laugh out loud and I'm going to laugh hard. Because you know what? Laughing is healing. If you laugh, you actually cause other people to smile and laugh. It's contagious. And there are studies that say if you laugh out loud, it sets loose the good endorphins, it fills you with oxygen, and it just blesses other people. So I just decided I'm going to laugh loud and I'm going to laugh out loud. I think number 6, I don't know. Why are we worrying about keeping track of these numbers? I don't mean to freak out you people who like lists. Okay? Spend time with someone you love. So find someone you love. I've been building special memories with my family. There's another one. Lose yourself in something. Here, I had a moment with God where I felt God say to me, there's a blessing in even cancer if you stop. And so I lost myself in a moment. For me, it can be movies. You know, it's that thing where you just kind of wake up and you realize what I've been doing for the last 2 hours, or it's reading a good book, or it's playing a game with somebody. But I also had lost myself in this moment. And it kind of combines with nature and with someone that I love. I was standing outside and God said, live this moment. All 5 senses, Michael. So I became mindful of the moment. I was grilling. I took a deep breath and I could smell the meat that was grilling. I looked up with my eyes and I saw this beautiful blue summer sky. I could feel the breeze of a summer afternoon washing over me. I could hear the laughter of my family inside the house. And I reached over and I touched the steak as it was grilling and I could feel it. All 5 senses. And what I felt God was saying is like, you can build a memory right now that you'll never forget. Choose to live in the moment. Get lost in it. Breathe it in. Engage all 5 senses and find the peace of it. Meditate on the promises of God. I live on those promises. Man, they are my lifeline. I memorize them. I meditate on them. I pray them back to God. I wrestle with them when life isn't going the way that I expect. And I keep asking God to deliver, and I keep trusting that He will. There's only 3 more, so... No, there's 4 more. So hang in there. Recall the ways that God has come through in the past. I write them down. They're mile markers to me, moments when I know that God was present and He knew my name. There's some of them are mountaintop moments, like the wedding I just had with my daughter, or a moment from way back in the years when I was student ministries pastor, and it was on a missions trip, and I wrote it down. I reread those, and some of them are as current as that moment I told you when I was just grilling. I could hear my family laughing. They are mile markers to me that God has been present in my life. When I look back, I can see them. And in seeing them, I know that He's still leading me. Find music that lifts your soul. Worship music means a lot to me. And so, Song of Ascent by Hillsong has been a lifeline to me. It's why we're singing it. Because God is in the mountaintops and He is in the valleys, and I've been living in both. And so knowing that God is present has helped, that worship has helped lift me and focus me and fill me. It's why you should come back into our worship center, because there is something about worshiping in the midst of a community of believers that just lifts me out of the moment and lets me forget about the world and all of its problems and to live in the presence of God. Learn to pray to God in an intimate fashion. That's what Jesus taught us. So this is where you hear me all the time. It's like, I pray to Jesus, my brother. I pray to God, my Father. I pray to the Spirit. I pray through the Spirit, my intimate companion. And I say all the time, I love you and I trust you. Learn to pray like that. And don't be afraid to get angry, sad, confused, and to fumble through the words. If you ever have a child talk to you, you love it when they stumble over their words, because you just love the sound of their voice, and God does yours. Last one. Speaking of a child, spend time with one. There's something about being around a child that just lifts my spirit. A lot of you know that I have a grandson. He's so precious. Bobo, our little Bowman. And there'll be times when I'm with him and he is laughing, and his, like I said, laughter is so contagious. I start to laugh, or I'm playing on the floor with him, or I'm holding him as he goes to sleep. And I love it when he just rests his head against my shoulder in such a tender, trusting fashion. It's okay in a hard world to feel that. I know people who like lists, I just freaked you out, right? So I'm going to give you my list. Exercise, do my 10 blessings, find what recharges your battery, connect with nature, laugh out loud, spend time with someone that you love, lose yourself in something that you enjoy, meditate on the promises of God, recall the ways that God has come through in your past, find music that lifts your soul, learn to pray to God in an intimate fashion, and spend time with a child. Those things help keep my head above the waves, but here's a secret. You're going to sink at some point. And it's okay to cry out, Jesus, save me. And so for years I thought when he said, oh, you of little faith, I thought he was really criticizing and angry at Peter, but then I thought Peter's the only one to get out of the boat. And it's a little word that Matthew uses. It's actually, the word is little faith. He only uses it twice, and he only uses it in the disciples when they're caught in overwhelming situations. I tend to think there's a tenderness to it, where he just shakes his head and goes, little faith, why did you take your eyes off of me? And he lifts them up out of the waves, and he puts them in the safety of the boat, and then he calms the storm. And so there have been times when I've gotten depressed, I've gotten angry with God, I've been fearful, and I've struggled, I've wept, and I just feel at the end that God says, little faith, don't take your eyes off of Christ. Keep moving forward one step at a time. Keep your head above the waves. We're going to get to the stillness through this storm if you trust me. I hope that helped. God bless everyone who listened to this, and please do something good in their life because of it. I love you, Jesus, and I trust you. Amen.